Welcome back to the channel, and we're going to look at something a little bit different today with bunkers, and just looking at standard basic default bunkers, nothing too flashy. How do you get them to look good? How do you get them to sit properly? How do you go about sculpting them, shaping them, and really just your workhorse bunker where it's nothing too flashy. We're not looking at sandbelt or flat bottoms or anything waste bunkers, nothing too complicated, just basic bunkers, shaping, sculpting, and how to sit them essentially. So the first thing we're going to look at, a new hole, and let's find one which could use something. So we're going to look at this one here. You can see I've planned out roughly where it's going to be. So with this one, we're looking at, you might land here and run into it. Now firstly, you want to look at where it's sitting. So ideally, you want your bunker to have a high side and a low side. That's message number one. So if we draw a measure tool, we can see there's a little bit of a high side here and a low side here. We're also going to have this part slightly higher than this part. That way it's facing the player, so when we're looking at it, as you can see, you don't really have to work too much with the sightline with this one, and we've done some work on the bunker layering, so you'll see this one and then the one behind it. But this is the one we're going to look at. So ideally try to find a way, before you're really even starting your bunker, try to make sure that you've got this high side and low side already there. It will just save you so many issues. And a lot of what I will see where people are really struggling is where you're trying to have the high side over here. It's a really horrible example, but they're then trying to sculpt this bunker with a hill here, and that's just, there's no way to sculpt that bunker where it will look good. So you've got to, and it's got to make sense with the land. That's, I guess, message number one. So really think about your land movement before you start and before you lay down the bunker. In terms of part two would be your shape. Now, first one is make sure your bunker's a decent size. So I'd say 20 by 10 is a pretty standard bunker shape, maybe slightly on the big side, but that will do for the course we're making. If you're going to like 5 yards or so at width, you're going to find the sculpting a nightmare because there's just not enough room for the land to go down and up again, and it will all look like it's falling in on itself. In terms of shapes, it's going to depend a little bit on your course, but I tend to sketch them out with a measure tool first, and usually I'll try to base it around one little projection of sorts. So we'll just draw that little finger in there, and a lot of this is random, but it's a fairly straightforward shape. And if we go back, you can look from the T and work out, does that roughly look where I want it to be? Is it filling the space? You can have a feeling, you can start imagining how it will look. To me, that looks okay. You don't want to have too many projections in this, because again, if you're, let's say we were doing a little bit coming in there and a little bit coming in there, or suddenly your actual usable space is down to 5 yards, in which you're going to have to go down and then back up again. So that will be a bit trickier. If you don't like your shapes, just delete some measure tools, work around it, but you don't need to be too perfect with this. Numbers of ways in which you can do the shapes. You can either, if you're going for that ragged edge bunker look, which I think I am on this, I tend to take this brush, don't make it all the way small, medium sort of size, and just spam and click. And you don't want to do too many of them or it gets a very smooth edge. So as you can see, it's slightly ragged. And then you can take the little circle brush, and again, if you make that as small as possible and then drag it around, that's going to first of all smooth out some of those edges, just a little, but it's going to keep some of that ragged look as well. Now I might then go in, and if we remove the distance markers, measure tools now I might redo it and just go, well, I don't like that little bit there, this little pointy out bit here isn't doing it for me. We'll lose this bit, probably take a little bit off there, and you just tweak it so that you get it roughly how you want it. And that might mean going back into area select, choose those couple of bits where you can find them and just redo those. And often it's only a couple of brushes, and sometimes just deleting them can make life a lot easier and make this work. So just smooth out this little bit a touch more. And then zoom back to the T, look at how it looks from there. I think this is looking a little bit thin, so probably want to take that one out, and maybe let's just move this one. And in actual fact, having looked back at it, I now don't think it will be. I think I just need to sculpt it. So you might tweak these as you go, and you gradually end up with a bunker shape that you can like. Now it won't ever look perfect before you sculpt it. Sculpting is a large part of the process. So say we're happy with that shape. We're not perfectly, but pretty good. Now the first thing to say, if you're doing it with odd shapes like this, even though they look like they overlap, they don't. There's going to be little holes in them. So you'll want to take this circle brush, and you'll see when we look at it, we're just going to drag this through, and you'll notice when we let go of the brush, so we've covered all of it, and when we let go, the sand pops down. Now that's not because we've done any sculpting, it's just because there were bits where it wasn't actually bunker, but it was showing as if it was. So sometimes if you're fighting weird bits in your bunkers, that can be what it is. So yeah, that's shape sort of covered. Now in terms of your really simple bunkers, I think in this game you can make it really straightforward with just a few things. For me, the easiest way of doing a standard one is take your fuzzy brush on flatten, make it relatively big, and just have a couple of clicks inside the bunker. So one there, we can do one there, and we'll do one kind of in the middle. Now that's going to do a lot of the major work for us. Now we're going to go to the raise, and again you can either take this one, or this one works quite nicely as well. And we're not going to go too big, let's go 5 inches or so. I'm just going to go around the lip, but not too close to it. You can see how the middle of the brush is tracing like about here, so leave a little bit of width. The reason for that is the bunker will look infinitely worse if your sand is going right up to the top of it. So let's put that in. As you can see, it's kind of like it's falling away. If we hit the undo button, it looks much better when you can see the lip as grass. So try to have the top of the bunker surface not being the very top of the hill. Now straight away this is looking pretty solid, we don't need to do that much more to it. But you might want to look at it from different angles and work out, if you're really caring about it, I'd probably go to raise, because you've got a little bit more control with raise. And just try to flatten it out just a touch, because the flatten tool you can overdo, so I tend not to use it that much. And with this I tend to use the fuzzy brush, make it pretty big, look at it from a couple of different angles, work out what it's doing. And it's not, the intent is not necessarily to be perfectly flat. I mean, you don't get lie grids in the bunker in this game in any case, but it's just to make it smooth, I guess. And there's a pretty standard bunker that we haven't really done too much with. So the final thing, if you haven't done this already, or if it's sticking out, is now to make this bunker look like part of the rest of the land. And what I mean by that is, you can see even with this one, the sculpting I've done, there's just a hill here to house the bunker, and that doesn't look like huge amounts because it was already sitting pretty well in the land. But I would then take that bunker and let's smooth the sculpting way further out, so that it looks like that bunker was always there. And this one hasn't needed that much of it, but you might also do things where it looks counterintuitive, but because this bit's been raised up, I probably want the land near it to be raised up, so we're going to raise that. But then you want people to see the bunker, so you may end up lowering the land in front of it just a touch. And there we go. Now in terms of sight lines and how can you make that a little bit better, there's a couple of little tricks you can do. Lowering the land gently in front of it, try to make your brush really big because it will have the effect you want, but the more we lower that, the more you're going to see of the bunker. And the more we raise that, the less you're going to see of the bunker. So going like 1 feet down, that's going to expose pretty much all of the bunker compared to what it was. Quite happy with where it is now. Equally though, the other way you could do it, take this brush, something quite sharp, or you could do the slightly fuzzier one if you want your transition into the land to be a bit better. Let's say you can't see any of the bunker. I'd make it so that the bunker is encased in the whole brush, and just raise it up using that. You can zip back to your T, see roughly what you're looking at. Well, what happens if we lower it a bit, raise it a little bit, where exactly do you want it? And with this one, might even like it just peeking out. So maybe we'll actually lower it a touch. And those things may not make a huge difference, but when you start getting your sightlines right, that can make a big difference. So that's basically all of it, and hopefully that's useful. That's how I do basic bunkers. There's not a lot of sculpting required. Shaping I would spend more time on than I have here. I don't really like the shape, but it serves a purpose. So yeah, hopefully that helps, and let me know in the comments if you have any further questions. Hopefully useful.